Stand by. Is this thing on?
Yes, Dan.
Oh, hello.
You're listening to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
This just in.
Breaking news to report.
We are live.
Old newscasters
Can we just say former?
Sure. Former newscasters reunite behind the mic after more than 20 years.
Old news is good news.
Stay tuned.
Welcome to Old News with Dan and Carrie. We are excited to soak up the knowledge of our guest today. Tami Kou was a TV news reporter and anchor in news markets, including Madison and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Then she shifted into PR and marketing roles for companies including Kohl's and Generac. Today, she's using her expertise within her own Milwaukee company, Kou Communications. Here to tell us more is Tami Kou. Welcome, Tami.
Hi, Carrie. Hi, Dan. Oh, I am
Hi, Tami.
so happy to see you guys. It's been way, way too long.
Way long, like at least 20 years.
Yeah.
20. Yeah. So
But
you
we
had,
ascertained it was less than that for Tammy and I before we
That's
went on
true.
here. It's
You
about
guys
15
talked.
for us. So we
Yeah.
look exactly the same to each other.
Right, exactly.
We do.
nothing has changed. So we
No.
knew you at WKOW. We were, well, you and I also were in school. No, weren't you were you in our UW program? Or no, you went
I
elsewhere.
was at UW-Madison.
Yeah.
I don't think that we were in the same class.
What
I
year did
think
you
that we were-
graduate?
Well, I had 5 degrees and 5 majors, so it took me a little bit longer. So
Oh, is that all?
5?
I actually
What the heck?
I graduated in the fall of 1994. Oh, I just dated myself.
Well, that's all right. So I was 95 spring. So I think we had a little overlap. I felt like I
Right.
knew you before the station. But wait a minute. Let's go back 5 majors. What the heck? What were you majoring in?
Yeah. So, well, I started in poli-sci, but then of course, you take your first journalism class and then you're hooked. And
Mhm.
then so I added on journalism, and then I decided, well, I could also do international relations. And then I started doing Chinese for my language.
Wow.
And then I added on East Asian studies. So there was some overlap there, but yeah.
Still.
Yeah, it was a very studious 5 years to get out in 5 years. So
You just added a new degree every year. Pretty
uh,
much.
yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, oh, I'm so close. If I just take a few more classes, then we'll get there.
But isn't
That's
that all stuff that
unbelievable.
kind of fed into your journalism, kind of your passion for journalism anyway? A lot of crossover, as you said.
Oh, yeah. A lot of crossover and a lot of kind of shared credits too between the different paths. So yeah, all fun, all good. Yeah. Glad that I'm not doing that anymore.
So you did not arrive at school thinking, I want to be a TV journalist.
No, actually, I thought that I was going to go on to law school. I was
Mm.
dead set on it. I thought for sure I was going to go on to law school. And then I had taken journalism as just, your broad offering, fulfill the humanities class. And then from there, I was like, wow, I'm hooked. Like, this is what I want to do. Like, I suddenly found a new path, and then I just decided to pursue that. So
The proposal goes before the Board of Regents next spring, and if it's approved, students in Madison could be facing larger tuition bills as early as the 95-96 academic year. In Madison, for Campus Update, I'm Tami Schmidt. A working smoke detector reduces the risk of dying in a home fire by half. In Madison, I'm Tami Schmidt for Campus Update.
What was your first job as a journalist then?
well, so if we're talking about, if we rewind, during
Yeah.
college, I actually worked at the Wisconsin Department of Transportation Office of Public Affairs. I knew that I wanted to be a reporter, but I also knew that I was going to need to understand the other side of who was
Right.
getting, interviewed, et cetera, and how they were putting things together to talk to the media. And so I decided to take the opportunity to apply for the job and see if I could get it. I did. And then they just kind of kept me on semester after semester after semester. And so before you knew it, I was there for 3 years. And at the same time, I also worked at WOLX, which was an oldies radio station.
Oh,
Right,
in
94.9.
Madison.
Still is.
Yes, you even remember the call letters, Dan.
I
That's
still
awesome.
listen to them
I was
because
gonna
I'm
say, he
old.
probably listens.
That's awesome. So they do cut-ins. You know, they're very, very short clips of news, weather, sports, maybe like 2.5 minutes tops at the top and the bottom of the hour. And so I was the afternoon anchor starting at like 3:30 till about 6:30, Monday through
Yep.
Friday.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I also did an internship at ISC, WISC TV, Channel 3 in Madison. Yeah,
So at that-
so I did that before I graduated.
Oh,
And
and meanwhile, there's 5 majors happening. So 3 jobs and 5 majors is what
Hey,
Tami was doing in college.
Carrie, I was committed that I was going to make this journalism thing work. So
Yeah, you were. I always knew you were a hard worker, but that's kind of next level.
Well, getting the first job was kind of interesting because we had been told in school, and Carrie, I don't know if you remember this, having gone through the program at UW-Madison, you know, pack up all of your tapes and do the road show. You know, tell the news directors that you're going to be stopping in on X date, see if you can get a face-to-face with them, and then make that connection with them. So I did that. I did the tour across Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Upper Illinois.
I did that too. I did the same thing, Tami. I did.
Pack up the car with the suits, your best suits, and your tapes, and then drop them off face to face with the news directors, right? And I had also been following around the news director from Eau Claire, John Hofflin, because he was with the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association. And I was dead set on getting my first job in Eau Claire because we had been told in school that he's a great news director. You're going to learn a ton from him. So I was like, whenever he was talking anywhere for the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association or anything, I was in the front row. So I showed up at numerous events. I stopped in, dropped off my tape, saw him. So I had been in contact with him numerous times over several months. And then he called me.
And he was like, if I don't give this girl a job, I'm never going to get rid of her. No.
It's that or a restraining order.
Right.
Very close, very close. So this was about 5 months after graduation, and he called me, and John said, Tami, your tenacity has paid off. I have a job offering for you. We just had somebody move on to their next job, and the producer that was producing that show would like to try her hand at being the weather girl / reporter. So that gives us an opening for a producer role. And I thanked him, but I said no, because I knew I wanted to be a reporter and I didn't want to start down that path and then have to rewind and then go back and then try to find if I wanted to do a reporter role, you know, if you get up so high, right? So
good for you. Good for you to stick to your guns on that. Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I did the right thing. Well, it turns out I got my answer about 2 days later. He called me back and he said, do you remember that girl that I just told you about who wanted to try her hand at being the reporter / weather girl? Well, actually, she tried it. She hates it. So she's going to go back to the producer role. So do you want to be the weather girl / reporter? And I said, absolutely.
Yes.
I didn't even know what it was going to pay, but I was like, I am so on it. And I told him, but I told him, I know nothing about weather. And he said, don't worry. Our weather guy will teach you everything you need to know. So I went out, I bought a USA Today publication of everything you needed to know about weather. And I studied up for the next week and a half until the job started. Packed up everything that I had in my car and went up there. And then I was in Eau Claire. That was my first real gig for TV for 10 months. Yeah.
10 months. I was going to ask how long. Typically, it's not a year for most people in that first job.
Yeah. So I also remember he told me during the process of onboarding, if I can keep you for a year and a half, then I'm doing really well, because the first 6 months you're going to be behind the curve as you learn all of the ropes. The next 6 months, you're going to be right on pace of where you should be. And hopefully, I'm actually ahead of the curve for the last 6 months. So if I can keep you here a year and a half, that's my goal. And I thought, okay, if I can get out then before a year and a half, that's my goal.
You're a goal buster. Yeah.
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 Well, I'm from the Milwaukee area. And so I always knew that coming back to Milwaukee was really where I wanted to be. And so that was kind of the vision of somehow finding my way from Eau Claire over to Milwaukee. And so the next stop then was with you guys. So after 10 months, then I got on over to WKOW.
And before
So-
we
Before
get
we-
to that chapter,
Yeah,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, I want to know more about you the first time you did the weather. And you did not have that meteorology background, but you had studied for a week and a half. Did it flow out? Did it go well? Or did you kind of fumble your way through?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So if you turn on the evening news right now, whether you're in a Madison size market or a Milwaukee size market, the weather probably lasts maybe about a good 3 minutes tops, right? Not in Eau Claire, because there's not as much going on. And so sometimes the producer would give you a good 6.5, 7 minutes.
Oh my.
Oh yeah. And in addition to that, I had to draw my own maps too.
Oh,
Oh yeah, no. So I was the weather person. My news director called it the weather girl, but I was the weather person.
right.
Shows on the weekend. And so I would get in about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would be drawing my own. And so
Oh my.
every weekend.
So like hand drawing, like graphic drawing, or how?
Yeah, so you'd use the computer system, but then you would outline based on the maps that were being fed from AP, like
Yeah.
exactly which portion of the country was going to have 60-degree temperatures, like where the band was, and then what the airflow was like. And so I would even put on there the time of sunrise and the time of sunset. And oh my gosh, these weather segments were so long.
That is long.
Producer had so much time to fill. And so I was drawing map after map after map until the show. And then, of course, practicing, and then just getting used to the green screen, and where you were
Yeah.
pointing to. And so there's a lot to learn in Eau Claire in a very short amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds
Well,
super stressful.
And let me ask you this. You mentioned that John Hoffman was the guy you wanted to work for up there because you heard good things about him as a news director. And did that come to fruition? Did you learn a lot from
Oh,
John?
yeah.
Because I had the opportunity to meet him too. Great guy and knew a lot of stuff, but I'm assuming that worked out well.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a fantastic boss, a great teacher. Unfortunately, he's no longer here. He passed
Right.
away a number of years ago, but just fantastic, and always just really anxious to teach his team, and very hands-on, just passionate about the business. Just a great boss and a great cheerleader.
And what,
And a word-
yeah, that's incredible that the moment you walked in the door, he had that vision of you're going to be behind here, but we're going to catch you up here. And then I want you to excel and fly away. I mean,
Yeah.
what an extraordinary attitude he had about that.
Yeah, well, I think he realized too that you weren't going to make a fortune in the Eau Claire market. And so he was very real about that. And then he also recognized that the pay was very low. And so he also offered the opportunity to me to be the shooter for the anchor, who was going to be the one-man band for the day. So she was going to be shooting her own package and then airing that in the evening newscast. And recognize that it's easier if somebody has a shooter when they go out, and probably especially for, all of us newbies, right? So he said, if you want to stay around, I know you've been here, this is 1 o'clock in the morning, but if you ever want to stay around and shoot for the day, feel free, and I'll pay you the time and a half. So I was like, absolutely, that's another skill that I can use. So I would stick around after I did the morning newscasts, and then I would be the shooter for the anchor as she was putting together her package. So yeah, in that first market, it was very much learn absolutely every skill that you possibly could. And then, and I also didn't know, maybe I like shooting, and then, maybe I would actually want to switch to the other side. That didn't happen because I was never a great editor. It always took me so long to edit. So yeah, that was not my skill set.
But a word that John used to describe you that I would have said the same thing just from my memory of you as a reporter at WKOW is tenacious. And I think like that's the first word that comes to my mind is tenacious when I think of, well, back then you were Tammy Schmidt. And
Yes.
if you got on a story, you were gonna get your jaws on that story and you were gonna get that story. That's at least that was my impression.
Oh, thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
And was that something you cultivated?
I really worked on that. And I don't want to jump ahead too far, but I think that it's that tenacity then that also got me to Milwaukee. So there's a story that goes there too. So yeah.
All right. So now we've come to WKOW. This is where we worked in the same place, and we were usually ships passing in the night, but you also filled in the mornings and then ended up taking over mornings, right? Did you, or no, you didn't take, I think you just filled in for a while.
I filled in for a while. Yeah. So I was fill-in anchor occasionally, but reporter really most of the time.
But we would see you a lot because, as you mentioned, you were one of those people who would work longer hours than you were scheduled to because you might have been working on things. So often we would see you when we came in. I don't know if often's fair, but a fair amount, we would see you at 1:30 in the morning, 2 in the morning after working a night shift.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you have to keep your tape up to date. So
well, there was that too, right? Yeah, I remember that.
That's when
That's
we
where you
saw
really got good at
several
editing.
people in the booths. They were all updating their resume tapes.
I'm sure it's a much different story today. I was thinking
Right.
about that as I was thinking about the segment, just how different and all of the various different tape formats that I even went through just in the amount of time that I was in the business, which was 10 years total for TV.
Which is funny. We've talked to so many people, obviously, and a lot of the people we talk to have journalism roots. Most of them do. But many of them worked much less time as a journalist than they have in other professions. But those years in journalism really kind of formed who they were in their jobs later on.
Oh, yeah.
Shape their skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that no doubt about it. It's because of those 10 years that I feel so equipped in terms of pitching media, how I frame up my strategic communications plans, how it is that I do my job, my media training that I offer. Absolutely everything is based in that first 10 years of what I learned. Yeah.
And in terms of Madison, I mean, you talked about what you kind of gained out of Eau Claire. What was it in Madison that you think you gained more than anything else that then catapulted you into Milwaukee?
I think it's just the ability to do so many live shots in Madison that in Eau Claire, it took an act of God in order to get a live shot done, just because they just didn't have the staffing for it, right?
Yeah.
And so but in Madison, it was really common to be doing live shots all the time. So the ability to go out there and to just survey the situation and then hop on air within a matter of minutes that you never had the time to do or the opportunity to do in Eau Claire. So I think that that's really where I honed the ability to do live shots and to do them well.
So you said you learned or you brought with you the live shots. What are some other skills that you think you really honed in Madison?
Yeah, so I think it's just about the depth of the reporting as well, and also finding the various different story ideas and being able to track those down and find all of the necessary people to be in the story to round out the story. Because in Eau Claire, sometimes they were planning out the story even like the day before. Whereas if you're in a Madison sized market, or a Milwaukee size market, that's never going to happen, right? You're not planning necessarily for tomorrow all the time. Sometimes you have that luxury and there's bigger events, but for the most part, you're bringing in story ideas that morning and then discussing those story ideas and then going out and then seeing those to fruition. In addition to that, it's the actual story ideation process too, because in Eau Claire, I think that the news director was very helpful, and there were some great assignment people as well who had been there for a while. But I don't think that you hone that skill until you can really see how they stack a newscast and exactly what goes into it. So we didn't have the morning news meetings and the afternoon news meetings like we do or did in Milwaukee. We didn't have those in Eau Claire. And so in Eau Claire, it was like you came in, you went to the assignment desk and they handed you your assignment, and then boom, that was it for the day, right? So it was much different in Madison and Milwaukee.
And did you have a favorite type of story you like to do, Tammy? Was it politics? Was it crime? Was there something you liked doing more than others?
Yeah, actually, so if you ask the folks over at WKTI radio and the news anchors there, or the DJs, I should say, they had a nickname for me. They called me the Mistress of Disaster. So, so it seemed like everything that was bad, I was chasing. So whether it was political wrongdoing, and then I was chasing those politicians for a comment, or if it was just a natural disaster, that's the nickname that they gave me whenever they saw me in the halls, or sometimes lovingly on air. And so I would say, yeah, it was more of the hard news angle.
Good evening, Mike and Carol. Imagine waking up in the morning, walking outside the front door of your home, and finding this graffiti painted all up and down and all across the front of your home. Under the proposal, anything containing pseudoephedrine, like this product, 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 you get the idea, would have to go back behind pharmacy counters. The pharmacists say they simply wouldn't have the space for it all or the time to dispense it. Mike, we're here at 77th and Keefe on Milwaukee's northwest side, where a very frightening story is being told. The woman who lives in that house there behind me says that she and her 2 teenage children were abducted from their home in the middle of the night last night.
But occasionally I got some softer, fun stories. In fact, as I was thinking about this segment, one of the segments that I came across that I'll send to you, it was about somebody who had an alligator going through her backyard in the town of Summers, and they happened to capture the alligator. That was a fun one. It was an elderly lady, and got to talk with her. But yeah, so for the most part, they were hard news stories, but occasionally.
What was it about hard news that really drew you to it?
I think it's just finding the truth and getting the answers. So, and also the immediacy of it. So generally it was the top story of the newscast. And so it was about making sure that you told the very, very best story so that everybody was tuning into your station. So I think that's what was fun about it.
How long were you in Madison before you went to WTMJ in Milwaukee, correct?
Yeah, Channel 4 in Milwaukee. But I was in Madison for 3 years and 3 months.
And did you set your sights then on TMJ? Because I mean, they were kind of the big dog at that time in Milwaukee.
Yeah, they were. And I had always watched TMJ growing up. And so I really knew that that was the station that I wanted to be at.
Yeah.
And Jeff Kiernan was the news director at the time at WTMJ TV. And I would call him every week on Friday morning. And I had chased him down just like I did John Hoffman. And sure enough, I would check in with him religiously and send him tapes and stay on his radar. And then I am convinced that the only reason why he gave me a job was so that I would stop calling him.
Again, we have a theme building.
I am absolutely convinced that I wore him down. So that was how I found my way into Milwaukee. So he had an opening at the time for a daybreak reporter. So going back to that theme of really early morning hours, I was back in the station at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes, and then I would leave a package for them. So I would be doing shots for the daybreak show. And then I would leave a package too that would typically run in their 4:30, sometimes 5 or 6 o'clock newscast. But sometimes I would be there as long as 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was clocking sometimes 11-hour days.
Oh
Yeah.
my.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
Who was the
there's
news
a real
director? Go ahead. Go ahead,
I was
Carrie.
going to say there's a real lesson in, I think that a lot of people in different industries could glean from your example of just you would set your sights on what you wanted, and then you would be formulaic of calling every Friday morning, continuously sending tapes, staying in touch. They knew your name, and lo and behold, there you were doing what you wanted to do in your hometown, which was a really respectable market. I mean, Milwaukee's in the 20 somethings, right? 24,
Yeah.
25-ish. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really remarkable.
Oh, thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I think Milwaukee was about 28, 29 or so in terms of market size, but it wasn't even about market size. It was because my parents are
Right.
here. And
Yes.
at the time, my grandma was still around
Ah.
and I had other relatives. And so just being able to come back home and to, do the news here, that was the goal. And I think then after being here, though, then it was like, do I want to move on to another market? Yeah, you know what? 10 years in, and then that's kind of where I decided, you know what? I want a new challenge. So that's where it kind of ended for me after 6 years here in Milwaukee.
Was there anything going on, I guess, maybe not only in your life, but in the news business at that time that might have helped kind of nudge you into the public relations world? Or was it just more the challenge?
Yeah. Well, two things. One is I had just gotten married, Dan. I had
Okay.
actually, yeah. So after about 9 years in TV, that's actually when the wedding bells happened. And then my husband had been offered a job with the company that he was at out in the Twin Cities. And so I was like, he said, if you want to stay in TV, that's great. And I'm all for that. And if you don't, then that's fine too. And you want to try the new challenge of public relations. I had seen so many of my other colleagues, though, flip over from reporting to PR and find so much happiness and success there. And also a normal schedule. So,
right.
like I had those super, super early mornings in Eau Claire. There were a number of them when I was filling in for you, Carrie, at KOW.
Yeah.
And then in Milwaukee, for the first year I was in Milwaukee, I was on the daybreak show. And then I managed to switch my schedule to the dayside show. So that's kind of more like a 9 to 6:30. And then finally at the end, it was the nightside show, which was considered to be the show to be on because you were leading into prime time, right?
Right. Yep.
Or coming out of prime time, sorry. And so I made my way into the nightside show, which was great. But then going to Minneapolis, I knew that I was going to be at the bottom of the rung again. And I was like, I don't know if I can do early mornings all over.
Yes.
And so I did interview actually, and I did get offered a job at KSTP, and it was for the early morning show, and I turned it down. I'm like, I don't think I can do that again. Not at that point in my life.
It's understandable, right?
Yeah. It must have been nice though to have had that offer, to know that you
Yeah.
could work in that market if you chose to.
Yeah, yeah. And or at least in the morning show, and see where it went.
Mm-hmm.
But I just decided I needed a new challenge in that time. And
And
I
so
also,
were you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and I also just needed a normal schedule because I had just gotten married and I wanted to see my spouse. So yeah.
Yeah, how about
Reasonable.
that? Were you at the same time then when you were like considering jobs in television up in Minneapolis? Were you concurrently interviewing for jobs in the public relations industry? And were there other industries that you might have been interested in too?
No, it really was public relations. And so I kind of took that same approach that I did with my previous jobs of just trying to get in, network with people, have conversations, see what was out there. And so I met with a bunch of people from super small agencies all the way on up to really large multinational agencies that had a presence in the Twin Cities. And I landed at a mid-sized agency in the Twin Cities. And I really credit that agency with laying the groundwork for everything that I know in public relations. It was just a fantastic opportunity.
So they were your Eau Claire.
Yeah.
In terms of TV, they helped train you for your next career.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was that transition like for you? Was it a hard transition to go from, television news to public relations, or tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think that initially the hardest part was just getting a hold of some of the terms, right? So I recall vaguely having had a PR class like back in college, right? But class is one thing, reality is another, right? And then so when I went in, there were just some real basics that I didn't know, but it's learning the language and then being able to take that and then move forward. So they weren't necessarily worried about like when news teams were meeting in the morning or the afternoon or thinking about that. They were thinking about media lists or editorial calendars. And I was like, okay, so now granted, this was 20 years ago, but
Right.
my first PR job, I was like, editorial calendar, like, what's an editorial calendar? And, like for me, I know what an editorial meeting is, but I didn't know what an editorial calendar was. And immediately when they told me, oh, well, it's when publications are going to do X, Y, and Z on this month or this week, etc. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, I got it. So it was more just like learning the terminology, but it came so quickly. It was just, those weren't the terms that we would use in the newsroom. So it was a little bit different. And then also going back and then learning strategic planning. So it didn't take long for it to click. It was about reversing things out in order to basically get where you're going, right? So that took a little bit of learning, but I think things clicked very quickly once I got into the throes of it.
Well, Dan, I feel like you've used that phrase. Isn't that what you were told too? You've got to do the strategic planning instead of like the immediacy of every day and kind of the fire drill of every day in a newsroom.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my first boss when I was in public relations said, he said, Presser, you got to sit down and think, don't just react. So it was like, it was the strategy part of it. And that was always the hardest for me when I did public relations. When I first started doing that was you have to think strategically like a chess player, as opposed to just, I'm going to win this battle right now. At least that was what I felt like.
Well, and you know what? That's a great way of describing it. And that's the part that I love so much about the
Oh.
work
Yeah.
that I do day to day.
Hmm.
It's really being able to take a look at a problem, an issue, an opportunity, and then figure out, okay, so the tools in my tool belt are communication tools. So how are we
Hmm.
going to tackle this issue? So,
Right.
and yeah, I think that that's what makes it so much fun.
Hmm.
Were you working with different clients in different industries at that time then with that agency, or did you kind of specialize in a certain, certain area?
So it was up in the Twin Cities. I had a lot of different segments of 3M. So I did a
Yep.
lot of work with 3M, aftermarket automotive division, marine, building and commercial services division, specialty vehicle. So I had like a half a dozen clients, so to speak, over at 3M at any given time. In fact, when I first started off with them, I had two segments. And then the work was going so well. And then 3M just kind of kept giving us more and more and more. And pretty soon I had a fast pass over at 3M. I had my own badge. And then so because I was going over there to meet with the client so much. And another client that I had, super fun, American Express. I had
Ah,
a couple of different segments with American Express, and that was a blast. So, and then in addition to that, some professional services, and then some other clients that you probably recognize their name, like Great Clips. I
yep.
also represented them as well.
Mm.
So, and
A
then
great
other clients.
foundation. Yeah. Really
Yeah,
good
yeah.
foundation of it. Cool.
Yeah.
So,
Did you move to Milwaukee after that job, or did you have more jobs in Minneapolis?
Nope. So in Minneapolis, it was about 6.5 years or so that I was with the agency and a number of different clients over the course of that time. But then from there, that's when there was an opening over at Kohl's Department Stores and Kohl's Department Stores corporate headquarters, which is
Mhm.
back here in Milwaukee. And so conversations started with them. And before you know it, I was back in Milwaukee, and I had already told my husband when we moved out to the Twin Cities that if we ever get the opportunity to move back home to Milwaukee, because my folks are here,
Mm.
that
yeah.
we're going to do that, right? And he said yes when we moved out to the Twin Cities. And so I held him to it. And so, yeah, so we moved back here to Milwaukee, and I worked at Kohl's Corporate.
Did he then get a job back down here, or was he able to kind of work from anywhere at that point?
Yeah, so he found a job, same company, different segment of the company
Got it.
back here in Milwaukee. So he was with the same company then when we came back here to Milwaukee.
Was it a
Uh,
learning
and and
curve switching from working with many, many different companies like you did in Minneapolis to just focused on one?
Well, there were a number of different angles that I covered at Kohl's based on, like what the need was. So I worked on corporate communications. And so corporate communications and supporting like their hospital partners program and also some of their community giving programs, their holiday programs. So it was almost kind of like you had separate clients. You
Mm.
just saw a lot of those clients time and time again throughout the course of the day. So, I will tell you that the best part about going to the corporate side is that you don't have to track hours. So, doing time tracking when you work on the
yeah,
side
Mhm.
is such a drag because you have to you have to remember to do that all the time and then enter your hours and then just make sure that your hours are in the system and everything is good to go. So yeah.
Hmm.
well, how long were you at Kohl's then, Tammy?
Yeah, so I was at Kohl's just a little bit more than 2 years. And then from there was an opportunity to move over to Aurora Healthcare.
Yeah.
And that was a step up to a director level position. And it was their director of public affairs. They also had a director of public relations. And I like to say that that individual, handled kind of more like the happy side of Aurora Healthcare, whereas my area for public affairs was kind of more issues management and
Crisis management, maybe.
issues management, crisis
Yeah.
management. I
Yeah.
also worked heavily too with the government relations team as
Okay.
well. And then also kind of larger scale projects that Aurora happened to be working on at the time. Like Aurora was setting up their own insurance package and own insurance offering. And then in addition to that, they were also announcing a presence on the Marquette University campus with the Athletic Performance Research Center. That actually ended up not coming to fruition for a number of different reasons, but kind of like large scale projects like that
Yeah.
are the things that I would work on along with, crisis and issues management.
So you were at the other end of the microphone as you were when you were a reporter. Since you were sniffing out the hard news stories, now you were on the other end. How was that?
Yes. Fun. So challenge, but let's just say that some of my closest colleagues were those in the legal team and the executive office. So I was working on a number of issues all the time, prepping for things, and then managing reputation for the organization. I loved that job. I had a fantastic boss, and it was just fantastic. I loved it.
Well, what got you to leave there then?
Yeah. So actually, that was the time, and maybe you know this now, Aurora and Advocate merged. And then so there was a sizable leadership change. My boss also left, a couple months prior to me leaving the organization. But then I took the opportunity to go over to A.O. Smith because they have a third of their business over in China. And if you recall at the beginning of this conversation,
5 majors.
It paid off.
I was like, okay, well, I'm finally going to get a chance to put those Chinese language skills to use, right? So I took a job over at A.O. Smith, and that was also going to give me the opportunity to hone in on my skills even more so for internal communications as well, because it was the whole kit and caboodle. It wasn't just external communications, which was primarily my focus up until now on the PR side. And so going over to A.O. Smith, I was doing external as well as internal. And getting to use my Chinese. So
international relations. Let's not forget about that major.
Exactly. Yeah. So from there, I went over to A.O. Smith, and it was a fantastic opportunity. Absolutely loved it. And it was great. It was a fantastic challenge, and it was wonderful. And
did you travel over to China at all? Did you have to?
Yeah. I did.
Okay.
I did a trip over there and it was about 2 weeks. And then in addition to that, colleagues from China would come over here occasionally then too. And then so that gave me a great opportunity as well. And then
you were able to converse, and they could understand you and you could understand them.
Yeah. So that was fantastic. And I loved it. It was great.
Were you exposed to the Chinese language before college at all? Were you speaking that in other, younger days or anything like that? Any family members or
no? Well, so my mom speaks Taiwanese, but it's
okay.
And so no, really, I learned Chinese through UW.
Wow.
And you were able to, you weren't using it up until that point. You maintained all those years.
Oh, Carrie, there was a lot of dusting off.
Got the leaf blower out.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there was some dusting off to be done, but I was just thrilled that I was going to be able to finally pull that in, because I had worked so hard at it during college that I was like, yes, I can actually use this now. So kind of coming around full circle again. So I feel like a lot of my life just keeps going like this, but
totally.
Yeah.
Were awesome. Clearly you had a lot of you had a lot of different experiences, not only in public relations, but in journalism as well, and different industries, from A.O. Smith to,
Goals.
Aurora, to Coles, to the agency in Minneapolis. Generac Power was another one, right?
Yeah.
Over the years. Then at what point did you decide I can do this on my own? I can consult. I can have my own company. And was that a tough hop for you, or was that something you always had a goal to do?
Well, having been at the agency in the Twin Cities, it was always something in the back of my mind that
Uh-huh.
at some point in time, I think that I might want to try my own hand at that. So, just having had that experience in the Twin Cities and also knowing the risk that my boss had taken too when she had started the firm and then she was so successful. And I was like, you know what? That's a challenge I think I might want to take on. And actually, it was my sister who was reminding me when I started talking about it again. She's like, because I didn't think I talked about it that much over the years.
Mm.
But she's like, yeah, you can stop asking me if I want to go into business with you. I'm like, have I brought it up that much? And she's like, uh, yeah. So brand manager over at Trek there in Madison.
Oh,
And so
really?
I've tried to lure her, I guess, over the years.
Once or twice.
And she's always turned me down. She's very
Hmm.
happy where she's at. But she's like, yeah, you've mentioned it kind of quite a bit over the
Hmm.
years. And so I didn't realize I had mentioned it that much. It was kind of maybe, later on in the career, but now we are in that stage of later on in the career. And so I decided last fall, you know what? This is the time. This is the perfect opportunity. And so, boom, I have my own agency now. Strategic
How's it?
and public
Does she
relations.
work with you? Did she come with you?
No.
Or she's like, you do your thing, I'm staying over here at Trek.
Yep. Nope. She is still happily over at Trek, and she checks in with me, and she always wants to know what's going on. How's the business going? But no, I don't think that there's any chance that I'm going to be able to lure her over. Although I think that she would be a great compliment, and our skill sets are different. She's
Mm.
research based. She
Mhm.
went on to get her PhD in research, and she's much more on the marketing side, whereas mine is much more on the communications and public relations side. So I do think that it would be great to have her in the agency, but
Some
I don't.
point, planting the seeds.
Yeah, I'll send
So,
her this podcast later, Carrie.
so as you've done this now, are there people you mentioned, you saw your boss in Minneapolis had started an agency. Are there people you've leaned on that have helped you to kind of get your business off the ground or kind of give you some advice?
Yeah. So through the course of the years, I've met other people who have gone on and either started their own government relations firm or past bosses too that I've stayed in contact with, who I've thought of not just as a great boss, but also a great mentor. And so, just a really solid coach. And, like they know my strengths, they know my weaknesses, and they know, like how I take feedback. And so I've just leaned on them
Yeah.
and for their take, their understanding, their expertise. And then also my sister too, just because she is so entrenched kind of in that same avenue of
Mhm.
marketing. And, she'll tell it to me straight. And so with all of that feedback, then I've been able to get the business up and off the ground. And here we are today. So
Do you
yeah,
have a staff? Is it just you? What does your business look like?
yeah. So right now I committed to myself that for the first year, I was going to keep it max to myself, just one person right now, so that I can get a feel for how I want to calibrate as I go forward. And I didn't want to get too far ahead of my skis. So I'm at where I'm there. We're coming up on 1 year.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then we're going to figure out what the long distance plan looks like from there. But I do have, just given all of my years in business, in communications, I have so many photographers, videographers, graphic artists, other people who do buying for ads and other pieces like research that I've leaned on over the years, and I know in different capacities. And so as I have needs in other areas, I'm able to pull levers and then bring the appropriate people, the very best people in to work on projects with me. And so I've been doing it as a freelance basis to supplement the team when needed.
That's been a common theme as well. Like that's what Sandy Kowal does, and we had her on the show. And she has a huge pool that she draws from when she needs things. But her company is her, and then she just has a million excellent contacts. And same with Todd Vasky, he's doing the same thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So that seems to be a model that has been a common theme on the show.
Well, I'm going to have to go back and take a listen to those 2 episodes. So I heard the latest, greatest one that you had with Kim Dawson, and I saw Kim recently, but I'm going to have to go back and take a listen to a couple of those just to hear what they had to say about their model.
What was there anything, like any unexpected surprises you got when you started your business, or things that you weren't expecting to happen that kind of went, oh boy, this is something I'm gonna have to learn how to do?
Well, setting up my own website was a challenge that I knew I was going to have to take on. Actually, it got much, much easier, but I'm not a coder, not a web developer. So writing the copy for my website, not a problem. Actually getting it to look the way that I want it to look, both on the desktop and on the mobile device. Well, that's different. So there
Bit of a
was
learning curve, huh?
Yeah.
there was a little bit of trial and error and having to move things around a little bit. Maybe not the way I quite wanted them, but at least it looks just fine, right? So it's kind of, it's those pieces that I knew I was going to have the challenge, and I was like, okay, we're going to learn it. So and we did. So I developed my own logo, and so I'm kind of proud of it because design isn't my background. And then also setting up my website and just learning everything from start to finish, and learning all about the certification process that I'm going through with city, state, county, and other entities that I'm getting certified by. So yeah.
It's been your MO for many years though, where you kind of do a lot, and I mean, obviously since college, you've had your plate full, and you've learned how to do a lot of things. So you're kind of in the perfect place now. You can do it all.
Thanks,
yeah.
Dan.
And you're really rolling everything you've done up until this point. I mean, reading through your website, it's like all the things you've learned, all the things you've done. Now you've packaged it all up and are offering it to companies. Do you want to just run through like some of the things that you offer in Kou Communications?
Yeah, so everything from internal to external communications. I really do have a focus on crisis communication simply because I feel like I've been steeped in it so much and for so many years and for very large organizations. So crisis communications, media training, really strategic communications to help an organization grow or protect its reputation. So that's really my sweet spot.
All right. So now I'm going to ask you, because we're going to wrap up pretty quickly, but I always ask people what their worst job was, their best job, and if there's still something they're thirsting to do, whether it's job related or just life related. So what was your worst job, Tami?
Ooh, my worst job. I would have to say, no offense, I wasn't a really big fan of Kohl's just because it was just about selling t-shirts and retail is just not really my sweet spot. So manufacturing manufacturing and healthcare, that's really where my sweet spot is. So retail, I just really didn't have a passion for it because it was just about getting people to spend money, and that's not really where my
That's
heart
not
was
you.
at. Yeah.
And
So
how about the best job?
yeah, my best job was the job
Yeah.
that I'm doing right now. So
There you go.
That's
yeah,
where you want to be.
I found my calling. I found my calling. Yes.
That's great.
So there's not any, I mean, you're there now. There's nothing else you really are still wanting to do career-wise, but how about life-wise?
Life-wise, I couldn't be more happy. I
Mhm.
have a 7-year-old daughter, and she is growing up so quickly, and the ability to operate and run my own business and have her watch along, it's just been so sweet. And my husband is just great and so supportive. So I truly feel like I've won the lottery.
Oh,
And you live in a great area
congratulations.
too, Tammy.
Yeah.
You live in a
Yeah.
great part of Wisconsin.
I do. I do. I'm back here in the Milwaukee area and able to watch my old colleagues, those who are still there over at Channel 4. And
Yeah.
I'm just a hop, skip, and a jump from you guys over in Madison. So
Well,
yeah.
and Carrie's in Pittsburgh area.
I'm in the
so-
Berg.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm in the Berg. So, Tammy, my question is always, even all these years later, do you have TV bloopers that have stayed with you, maybe haunt you occasionally,
You dream about them.
or you chuckle about still?
Oh, well, I had one TV blooper. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to send it to you, Carrie, because I don't know where it's at, but
Oh, no.
I was cutting a stand up at KOW, and it was out in a cow pasture. And I was talking about the cows, and one happened to just lick all the way on up my arm. Of course, they caught it on camera, and I know that they showed it at a Christmas party, but it's been 20 years. I don't know where that thing is.
Oh, that's good.
Someday we'll hunt through all of those old Christmas tapes and we'll find it, Tammy.
Oh my gosh, those
that
would
would be
be
amazing. Those are my
They-
favorite. Well, is there anything else you would like to add before we part ways?
Yeah, if there's any newbies who want to break into television, the one thing that I would say is don't be afraid to pay your dues. So it's the starting in the small market and working just really, really hard in order to get into the next market. It takes time. And as much as I wanted to break into the Milwaukee market right away from the get-go, although I do think that it happens more nowadays than it did
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
when we were reporting.
Mhm.
I do think that that learning experience that I had out in Eau Claire was one that was fantastic. It was kind of painful because the pay was really low and the hours were not awesome, but just that, that work experience, and then also it just helped to keep that fire lit. Like, I have to get out of here within a year and a half. That's the goal that I've set for myself, and then moving on to the next market.
All right. Well, thank you
Great
so
advice,
much
yeah.
for spending time with us and sharing your knowledge and expertise. We appreciate it so much. And we wish you
Yeah.
the very best of luck with Kou Communications. And we will
Thank
put a
you,
link,
thank you.
we'll put a link in the show notes. If you're looking for Tammy's business, you can find it right in our show notes, so you won't have to work too hard to find her.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was
All
so
right.
Great talking to you.
seeing guys. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye, Tammy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
That's old news for now.
Join us next time.